Arthur blended in. He was the kind of man you'd pass on the street and immediately forget. Brown hair, average height, unremarkable clothes. He worked as an accountant, a job as thrilling as watching paint dry, but it paid the bills and offered the perfect cover for his other, more, specialized interests. Arthur wasn't just an accountant, he was a planner. A meticulous one. Every detail mattered. Every contingency accounted for. He spent weeks, sometimes months, observing, calculating, and preparing. He enjoyed the process, the mental chess game of anticipating every move and countermove. His apartment, though modestly furnished, was a testament to his organized mind. Everything had its place. Tools were neatly arranged in drawers, categorized by size and function. Maps and diagrams were pinned to a corkboard, detailing escape routes and security camera placements. Tonight, Arthur was putting his skills to the ultimate test. For weeks, he'd been studying Gems and Jewels, a high-end jewelry store downtown. The store's security system was state-of-the-art, but Arthur had found a flaw, a blind spot in their surveillance. He ran through the plan in his head one last time, each step ingrained in his memory. The timing had to be perfect. He checked his watch. The moment was approaching. A faint smile played on his lips. Tonight, Arthur wasn't just an accountant. He was an artist, about to create his masterpiece. He double-checked his bag, making sure everything was in place. A small flashlight, lock picks, a glass cutter, and a silent alarm jammer. He was ready. He grabbed his jacket and walked out the door, disappearing into the night, a wolf in accountant's clothing. The Gems and Jewels robbery wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was the culmination of months of careful observation. Arthur had spent countless hours outside the store, sketching the layout, noting the patrol patterns of security guards, and cataloging the arrival and departure times of employees. He'd even befriended the flower vendor across the street, subtly pumping him for information about the store's operations. His research extended beyond the physical store. He delved into blueprints of the building, obtained from the city archives under a false pretense. He studied the store's alarm system, finding its vulnerabilities through online forums frequented by security experts, and those who sought to exploit them. The acquisition of his tools was equally meticulous. He didn't want anything that could be traced back to him. The lock picks were purchased from a flea market using cash. The glass cutter was a vintage model, found at an antique shop miles away. The silent alarm jammer was the most challenging piece. He'd ordered it from a shadowy website using a prepaid credit card and a fake address. Arthur even practiced his entry and escape routes, running simulations in abandoned warehouses, timing himself down to the second. He memorized the traffic patterns of the surrounding streets, identifying alternative routes in case of unexpected roadblocks. He had multiple backup plans, each as detailed as the original. He considered everything, wind speed, weather patterns, even the lunar cycle. He wanted to be certain. Absolutely certain. He knew success depended on preparation. It was his mantra. He adjusted his gloves, making sure they fit perfectly. No room for error. He was ready to turn his plan into reality. Every risk had been assessed, every angle covered. Or so he thought. The black sedan hummed quietly as Arthur pulled into the gas station. 10 minutes. 10 minutes until everything changed. He needed to top off the tank. It was a minor detail, but Arthur never overlooked the minor details. A half-empty tank could become a problem if things went sideways. He filled the tank, the scent of gasoline momentarily overpowering the crisp night air. He paid at the pump with cash, another layer of anonymity. Then, almost as an afterthought, he decided he wanted a soda. He hadn't planned for it. It was an impulse, a momentary lapse in his otherwise rigid schedule. Inside, the gas station was brightly lit and smelled of stale coffee and lottery tickets. The cashier, a young woman with tired eyes, barely glanced at him as he grabbed a cola from the cooler. He paid with another crumpled bill and received his change and a receipt. He took a swig of the soda, the sugary sweetness a momentary jolt. As he walked back to his car, he absent-mindedly crumpled the receipt in his hand and shoved it into his pocket, intending to throw it away later. He was too focused on the plan, on the timing, on the intricate steps he was about to take. He started the engine and checked his watch. 9 minutes. He pulled out of the gas station and headed towards Gems and Jewels, the crumpled receipt still buried in his jacket pocket, a ticking time bomb in his otherwise perfectly orchestrated plan. It was a small thing, a meaningless piece of paper, but it would prove to be his undoing. The soda had been a mistake. The receipt, an oversight. And oversights, Arthur was about to learn, had consequences. Big consequences. The back alley behind Gems and Jewels was shrouded in darkness. Arthur parked the car 2 blocks away, as planned, and approached on foot. He wore dark clothing, blending into the shadows. He reached the predetermined entry point, a rarely used service entrance. He worked quickly and efficiently. The lock pick slid into place, and with a soft click, the door swung open. He disabled the alarm system with the jammer, a wave of relief washing over him as the silent alarm didn't sound. He was inside. The store was silent, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and polished wood. He moved through the display cases with practiced ease, bypassing the laser grids and pressure sensors he had painstakingly mapped out. He knew exactly where to go, the main vault. The vault door was a formidable barrier, but Arthur was prepared. He entered the combination, a series of numbers he had memorized from a disgruntled former employee's online rant. The heavy door swung open, revealing rows of glittering diamonds, emeralds, and rubies. He worked swiftly, emptying the display cases into his bag. He focused on the most valuable items, the pieces that would fetch the highest price on the black market. He avoided the lower value items, minimizing his risk and maximizing his reward. Within minutes, the bag was full. He retraced his steps, re-engaging the vault lock and quietly exiting the store. He resecured the service entrance and melted back into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. Back in the car, he checked his watch. The entire operation had taken less than 15 minutes. No alarms. No witnesses. No trace. He had pulled it off. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a heady mix of relief and triumph. As he drove away, Arthur believed he was in the clear, a ghost in the night, leaving behind only an empty vault and a trail of meticulously erased footprints. But the ghost had forgotten something. Something small. Something easily overlooked. The receipt. Back at his apartment, Arthur transformed back into the unassuming accountant. The dark clothing went into a heavy-duty plastic bag, along with the gloves and lock picks. He sealed the bag tightly and stashed it in a hidden compartment beneath his floorboards, a space he had prepared long ago. He meticulously cleaned the car, wiping down every surface, inside and out. He paid special attention to the steering wheel, door handles, and gear shift, removing any lingering fingerprints. He even used a special solvent to eliminate any trace of the alarm jammer's signal. He changed into a clean set of clothes, the comfortable familiarity a welcome contrast to the tension of the past hour. He took a long, hot shower, washing away the sweat and adrenaline. As the water cascaded over him, he replayed the robbery in his mind, scrutinizing every detail, searching for any potential mistakes. He found none. He had been perfect. He retrieved the bag containing the jewels and carefully placed them in another hidden compartment, this one behind a false wall in his closet. He admired his handiwork, the glittering gems a testament to his skill and planning. He sat down at his desk and reviewed his financial records, making sure everything was in order. He created a false alibi, a detailed account of his evening that would withstand scrutiny. He even practiced his story in front of a mirror, perfecting his tone and body language. He felt a surge of confidence. He had covered every angle. He had anticipated every contingency. He was untouchable. He allowed himself a small smile, a rare display of emotion. He was a master of his craft. A ghost. He settled into bed, the soft mattress a luxurious reward for his efforts. As he drifted off to sleep, he replayed the robbery one last time, savoring his success. Little did he know, a crumpled piece of paper, tucked away in his jacket pocket, was about to unravel everything. He may have thought he was a ghost, but even ghosts leave shadows. And shadows can be seen. Detective Thomas Reynolds arrived at Gems and Jewels to a scene of controlled chaos. Uniformed officers milled about, crime scene tape cordoned off the alley, and the store owner, a portly man with a perpetually worried expression, wrung his hands anxiously. Reynolds was a man of quiet intensity. He possessed a sharp mind and an even sharper eye for detail. He was known for his ability to see patterns where others saw only randomness, to connect seemingly disparate pieces of evidence into a coherent whole. He had a reputation for solving the unsolvable, for bringing closure to cases that had gone cold. He surveyed the scene with a practiced gaze, taking in every detail, every nuance. The lack of forced entry suggested an inside job or, more likely, a professional. The alarm system had been bypassed, not triggered, indicating a sophisticated understanding of security protocols. He approached the vault, its heavy doors slightly ajar. The interior was a mess, the display cases emptied, the floor littered with velvet trays. The store owner hovered nearby, muttering about the value of the stolen jewels. Reynolds ignored him. He focused on the details, the precise cuts of the glass, the lack of fingerprints, the clean, efficient execution. This wasn't the work of an amateur. This was the work of someone who knew what they were doing. Someone who had planned meticulously. He spoke to the first responders, asking pointed questions, probing for any overlooked details. He listened intently, his eyes narrowed, his mind already piecing together the puzzle. He knew this case would be challenging. The thief was smart, careful, and experienced. But Reynolds was determined to catch him. He always did. He adjusted his tie, a habit he had when deep in thought, and a faint smile played on his lips. The game was afoot. And Reynolds was ready to play. Reynolds continued his methodical examination of the crime scene. The lack of forced entry was a recurring theme, screaming, professional. A smashed window, a kicked-in door, those were the hallmarks of an amateur, someone driven by desperation or impulse. This was different. This was calculated. The precision of the vault entry further reinforced his suspicion. The combination had been entered flawlessly, with no signs of fumbling or error. That meant the thief either knew the combination or possessed the skills to bypass the lock without damaging it. Both scenarios pointed to an experienced criminal. The way the jewels had been taken also spoke volumes. The thief hadn't simply grabbed everything in sight. They had selected the most valuable pieces, demonstrating a knowledge of gems and their market value. They weren't just stealing, they were targeting specific items. Reynolds knelt down, examining the floor near the vault door. He noticed a faint residue, almost invisible to the naked eye. He collected a sample, carefully placing it in an evidence bag. He suspected it was a lubricant, used to silence the vault door mechanism. A small detail, but details mattered. He stood up, his gaze sweeping across the room. The scene was clean, almost too clean. It was as if the thief had taken pains to avoid leaving any trace of their presence. That, in itself, was a clue. It suggested a level of sophistication that was rare, even among seasoned criminals. He turned to his second-in-command, Detective Miller, a younger officer eager to prove himself. "Miller," Reynolds said, his voice calm but firm, "I want every security camera in a 5-block radius reviewed. I want background checks on every employee, past and present. And I want a list of known jewel thieves operating in the area." This wasn't some random act of vandalism. This was a professional hit. And we're going to find him. The challenge invigorated him. He knew this case would test his skills, but he was ready. He just needed that one break, that one overlooked detail that would crack the case wide open. The days that followed were a frustrating exercise in futility for Reynolds and his team. They meticulously reviewed hours of security footage from surrounding businesses, searching for any sign of the thief, any glimpse of their vehicle, any indication of their escape route. But Arthur had been too careful. He had stayed out of sight, moving through the shadows, avoiding detection. Witness interviews yielded nothing of substance. The flower vendor across the street remembered seeing a few unfamiliar faces in the days leading up to the robbery, but nothing concrete. The employees of Gems and Jewels were cooperative but unhelpful, none of them able to offer any insights into who might have targeted the store. Background checks on former employees turned up a few disgruntled individuals, but none with the skills or resources to pull off such a sophisticated heist. The list of known jewel thieves in the area was long and varied, but none of them seemed to fit the profile. Reynolds felt like he was chasing a ghost. The lab results on the lubricant found near the vault door came back inconclusive. It was a common type of grease, readily available at any hardware store. It provided no leads, no connections, no answers. Reynolds grew increasingly frustrated. He hated dead ends. He hated feeling like he was one step behind. He spent sleepless nights poring over the case files, searching for something, anything, that he might have missed. Detective Miller, ever eager to impress, worked tirelessly, following up on every lead, no matter how improbable. He interviewed informants, reviewed old cases, and canvassed the neighborhood, hoping to uncover some overlooked detail. But he came up empty-handed. The case was on the verge of going cold. The media was starting to lose interest. The store owner was becoming increasingly demanding, pressuring Reynolds for results. Reynolds knew he needed a break, a lucky break, to turn the tide. He just didn't know where to find it. He stared at the evidence board, a chaotic collage of photos, maps, and documents, searching for a pattern, a connection, a clue. The answer, he knew, was hidden somewhere in the details. He just had to find it. Officer David Johnson was fresh out of the academy, eager to prove himself. He was assigned to trash detail, a task considered by many to be the lowest rung on the investigative ladder. But Johnson approached it with diligence and enthusiasm, meticulously sifting through garbage cans near Gems and Jewels, hoping to find a discarded glove, a misplaced tool, anything that might offer a clue. Most of what he found was discarded food wrappers, cigarette butts, and crumpled newspapers. But then, in a trash can behind a nearby bus stop, he spotted it, a crumpled gas station receipt. It was for a small amount of gasoline and a soda. It seemed insignificant, almost laughably so. Most officers would have dismissed it as irrelevant. But Johnson had been taught to pay attention to details, no matter how small. He smoothed out the receipt and examined it closely. It was from a gas station about 5 blocks away from the jewelry store. The date and time were clearly printed, 9:50 p.m. He remembered the timeline of the robbery. The break-in had occurred at approximately 10 p.m. A gas station receipt from just 10 minutes before the crime. It was a long shot, but it was something. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should bother Detective Reynolds with such a trivial find. But his training kicked in. He had been told to report anything that seemed even remotely suspicious. He walked back to the jewelry store, the crumpled receipt clutched in his hand. He found Reynolds poring over the evidence board, his face etched with frustration. "Detective Reynolds," Johnson said, his voice slightly nervous, "I found something in one of the trash cans. It might not be anything, but..." He handed Reynolds the receipt. Reynolds glanced at it dismissively, then his eyes widened slightly. He looked at Johnson, a flicker of interest in his gaze. "Where did you find this, officer?" Reynolds asked, his voice suddenly sharp and focused. Johnson explained the location and the time he had found the receipt. Reynolds took a deep breath. "Good work, officer," he said, a hint of a smile on his face. "This might be exactly what we need." The game had changed. The lucky break had arrived. And it had come in the form of a crumpled gas station receipt, found in a trash can by a rookie cop who refused to overlook the small details. Reynolds initially dismissed the receipt. A gas station purchase? So what? People buy gas all the time. It was likely just a coincidence. He was about to toss it aside when something caught his eye. The time stamp. 9:50 p.m. He grabbed the receipt again, holding it closer to the light. 9:50 p.m. 10 minutes before the estimated time of the break-in. A gas station just a few blocks from the jewelry store. It couldn't be a coincidence. He felt a jolt of adrenaline, a surge of excitement. This was it. This was the break he had been waiting for. He replayed the timeline in his head. The thief had to have been in the area just before the robbery. The gas station receipt placed someone, at least one person, nearby at a crucial moment. He looked at the receipt again, scrutinizing every detail. The gas station name and address were clearly printed. The items purchased, gasoline and a soda. A small detail, but perhaps revealing. Someone nervous might crave the sugar rush. Someone planning a long drive might need the fuel. He called Detective Miller over. "Miller, take a look at this," he said, handing him the receipt. "This was found in a trash can near the bus stop. The time stamp is just minutes before the robbery." Miller's eyes widened. "You think this could be our guy?" "I don't know," Reynolds said, "but it's the best lead we've got. I want you to pull the security footage from that gas station. See if you can identify the person who made the purchase. And get the license plate number of the car they were driving." He felt a surge of hope. The case was no longer cold. It was heating up. He had a lead, a tangible clue to follow. The thief had been meticulous, careful, and thorough. But he had made one mistake. He had forgotten to throw away a gas station receipt. And that mistake, Reynolds knew, would be his undoing. He smiled grimly. The game was back on. Reynolds dispatched 2 officers, Davis and Garcia, to the gas station. He emphasized the importance of their mission. "This could be our only lead," he told them. "Don't miss anything." Davis and Garcia arrived at the gas station and spoke to the manager, explaining their investigation and requesting access to the security footage from the previous night. The manager, a middle-aged woman with a weary expression, was initially hesitant but eventually agreed to cooperate. They spent hours reviewing the footage, fast-forwarding and rewinding, searching for the person who had made the purchase at 9:50 p.m. The footage was grainy and the angles were limited, but they were determined to find something. They focused on the pump where the gasoline purchase had been made, and then on the interior of the store where the soda had been bought. They watched as customers came and went, paying at the counter, grabbing snacks, and filling their tanks. Finally, they spotted him. A man matching the description they had pieced together from the flower vendor's vague recollections: average height, brown hair, unremarkable clothing. He was driving a dark sedan. The camera angle wasn't ideal, but they managed to get a glimpse of the license plate. It was partially obscured by a shadow, but they could make out a few of the numbers and letters. They carefully copied the relevant segments of the security footage and thanked the manager for her cooperation. They rushed back to the precinct, eager to show Reynolds their findings. Reynolds watched the footage intently, his eyes narrowed, his brow furrowed. The man was nondescript, blending into the crowd. But the license plate, even partially visible, was enough to give them something to work with. He turned to Detective Miller. "Miller, run this partial license plate number," he said. "See what you can find. And get a sketch artist in here. I want a composite drawing of this guy." The net was tightening. Arthur's meticulous planning had been undone by a simple gas station receipt. And now, Reynolds was closing in. He could feel it. The game was reaching its climax. While the sketch artist worked on the composite drawing based on the security footage, Reynolds decided to follow up at the gas station himself. He wanted to speak to the attendant who had been on duty that night, hoping to glean any additional information. He arrived at the gas station and found the same young woman who had been working the night shift. He introduced himself and explained his investigation, showing her a still frame from the security footage. "Do you remember this man?" Reynolds asked. The attendant squinted at the picture, her brow furrowed in concentration. She worked long hours, dealing with hundreds of customers every night. It was difficult to remember individual faces. "I'm not sure," she said hesitantly. "He looks kind of familiar." Reynolds pressed her gently, providing more details about the time of the purchase and the items bought. "He bought gas and a soda," Reynolds said. "Around 9:50 p.m. Quiet guy. Didn't say much." The attendant's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, yeah," she said. "I think I remember him. He was kind of unremarkable. You know, the kind of guy you forget as soon as he walks out the door." Reynolds nodded. "What can you tell me about him?" "Not much," she said. "Brown hair, average height, regular build. He was wearing a dark jacket, I think. He paid with cash. He was polite, but not overly friendly. Just quiet." Reynolds sighed inwardly. It wasn't much, but it confirmed what he already suspected. The thief was deliberately trying to blend in, to avoid drawing attention to himself. "Did you notice anything else about him?" Reynolds asked. "Anything at all?" The attendant thought for a moment, tapping her chin with her finger. "He seemed a little nervous," she said. "Like he was in a hurry. But that could just be me imagining things." Reynolds thanked her for her time and left the gas station. Back at the precinct, Detective Miller had been working tirelessly, enhancing the security footage from the gas station. He used specialized software to sharpen the images and reduce the glare, revealing more details than were initially visible. The enhanced footage confirmed Arthur's presence at the gas station. The image was still grainy, but there was no doubt that it was the same man the attendant had described. He was seen filling his car with gasoline, buying the soda, and paying at the counter. Even more importantly, Miller had managed to improve the visibility of the license plate. It was still partially obscured by a shadow, but he could now make out more of the numbers and letters. It was a partial license plate, but it was enough to narrow down the possibilities. He rushed into Reynolds' office, his face flushed with excitement. "Detective, I've got something," he said, holding up a still frame from the enhanced footage. "This is the best image we could get of the license plate." Reynolds examined the image closely. He could see 3 numbers and 2 letters. It wasn't a complete license plate, but it was a significant lead. "Run this through the DMV database," Reynolds said. "See if you can find any vehicles that match this partial plate. Focus on dark sedans registered in this area." He felt a renewed sense of optimism. They were closing in on their suspect. The gas station receipt had been the key, unlocking the door to their investigation. Now, they were just a few steps away from identifying the thief. He looked at the composite sketch that the artist had created. It was a generic face, unremarkable and easily forgettable. But now, they had a name, a car, and a motive. The pieces were starting to fall into place. The meticulous planning of the thief was unraveling, one small detail at a time. And it all started with a crumpled gas station receipt. Detective Miller and his team worked late into the night, hunched over computer screens, trying to decipher the blurry license plate image. They used advanced image processing techniques to enhance the contrast, reduce the noise, and sharpen the edges. It was a painstaking process, but they were determined to extract every last detail from the footage. They ran the partial license plate number through the DMV database, filtering the results to show only dark sedans registered in the surrounding area. The initial search yielded dozens of possible matches. But as they refined the search criteria, focusing on specific makes and models, the list began to shrink. They cross-referenced the remaining vehicles with the composite sketch, looking for any similarities. They also checked for any past criminal records or outstanding warrants associated with the registered owners. Slowly but surely, they narrowed down the list to a handful of potential suspects. Each vehicle was carefully scrutinized, its owner investigated, its movements tracked. Reynolds reviewed the list, his eyes scanning the names and addresses. One name stood out, Arthur Finch. He was an accountant, with no prior criminal record. He owned a dark sedan matching the description. And he lived just a few blocks from the gas station. Reynolds felt a surge of excitement. It was too much of a coincidence. Arthur Finch was their man. He pulled Arthur Finch's file and reviewed his background. He was an unremarkable individual, a quiet and unassuming accountant. He blended into the crowd. He was exactly the kind of person who could pull off a sophisticated heist and disappear without a trace. He looked at the composite sketch again. It was a generic face, easily forgettable. But now, with a name and a background, it came into focus. He could see the nervousness in the eyes, the slight tension in the jawline. He turned to Detective Miller. "Miller," he said, "I want a surveillance team on Arthur Finch. I want to know everything about him. Where he goes, who he talks to, what he does. I want to know everything." The game was nearing its end. The meticulously planned robbery was about to unravel. And it all started with a crumpled gas station receipt. Arthur, meanwhile, was basking in the glow of his success. The robbery had gone off without a hitch. He had outsmarted the security system, avoided detection, and secured a fortune in jewels. He had meticulously covered his tracks, leaving no evidence behind. Or so he believed. He had started to relax, to let his guard down. He had treated himself to a few small luxuries, a new suit, a bottle of expensive wine, a fancy dinner at a high-end restaurant. He had even started making plans to sell the jewels, contacting potential buyers through a network of shadowy connections. He felt a sense of accomplishment, a feeling of invincibility. He had proven that he was smarter, more capable, than anyone had ever given him credit for. He was no longer just an ordinary accountant. He was a master thief, a criminal mastermind. He replayed the robbery in his mind, savoring every detail. He had been perfect. Flawless. Untouchable. He spent his days going through the motions, pretending to be a normal, law-abiding citizen. He went to work, crunched numbers, and chatted with his colleagues. But inside, he was brimming with excitement, anticipation, and a growing sense of greed. He was unaware of the tightening net, the surveillance team that was watching his every move, the detectives who were piecing together the puzzle, one small detail at a time. He didn't know that his carefully constructed facade was about to crumble, that his meticulously planned robbery was about to unravel. He was living on borrowed time, his freedom hanging by a thread. And all because of a crumpled gas station receipt. He should have thrown it away. It was a simple mistake, a minor oversight. But it was a mistake that would cost him everything. He was about to learn that even the most meticulous plans can be undone by the smallest of details. The world was about to come crashing down around him, and he had no idea what was coming. Reynolds' team confirmed that the dark sedan seen in the gas station footage was indeed registered to Arthur Finch. The license plate matched the partial number they had obtained. There was no longer any doubt, Arthur Finch was their prime suspect. They established surveillance on Arthur's apartment, setting up a hidden observation post across the street. They worked in shifts, watching his every move, documenting his daily routine. They observed him leaving for work each morning, dressed in his unremarkable accountant attire. They followed him to his office, a mundane and unremarkable building in the financial district. They watched him eat lunch at the same deli every day, always ordering the same sandwich. They observed him returning to his apartment each evening, spending his nights reading books, watching television, and occasionally going out for a walk. He was a creature of habit, predictable and unremarkable. But they were looking for something more, something that would confirm their suspicions. They were waiting for him to make a mistake, to reveal his true nature. They noticed that he occasionally received visitors, men in dark suits who arrived and left quickly. They suspected these were his contacts, the potential buyers for the stolen jewels. They documented every detail, every interaction, every phone call. They were building a case, piece by piece, waiting for the right moment to strike. Reynolds reviewed the surveillance reports each day, his eyes scanning the details. He was looking for a pattern, a clue, something that would justify obtaining a warrant to search Arthur's apartment. He knew that time was running out. Arthur was getting ready to sell the jewels. Once they were gone, it would be much harder to recover them and to prove his guilt. He needed to act fast. He needed to find that one piece of evidence that would seal the case. He knew that Arthur was careful, meticulous, and disciplined. But everyone makes mistakes. And Reynolds was confident that Arthur would make one too. He just had to be patient. And wait. Arthur, despite his initial confidence, was not entirely at ease. He was a meticulous planner, but he also possessed a keen sense of awareness. He had learned to trust his instincts, to pay attention to subtle details that others might overlook. He started noticing things. A car parked across the street, always the same car, with tinted windows. Strangers who seemed to linger a little too long, watching him. A feeling of being followed, a sense that he was being observed. At first, he dismissed it as paranoia. He was on edge, anxious about getting caught. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. He started to take countermeasures. He varied his routes to work, taking different streets each day. He checked his rearview mirror constantly, watching for any signs of pursuit. He started to notice the same car, the same faces, no matter which route he took. He knew he was being watched. His paranoia escalated. He became more cautious, more vigilant. He cancelled his meetings with the potential buyers for the jewels, postponing the sale indefinitely. He re-evaluated his plan, searching for flaws, for weaknesses. He realized that he had become complacent, overconfident in his abilities. He had underestimated the authorities, assuming that he had gotten away with the perfect crime. He was wrong. He knew that he had to act quickly, to protect himself, to salvage what he could. He considered fleeing the city, disappearing without a trace. But that would mean abandoning the jewels, giving up everything he had worked for. He decided to stay, to fight back, to outsmart his pursuers. He would turn the tables on them, becoming the hunter instead of the hunted. He would use his skills, his intelligence, his meticulous planning abilities to expose their surveillance and to evade their grasp. He knew it would be risky, dangerous. But he had no choice. His freedom, his future, depended on it. The game was about to change. And Arthur was ready to play. But the detectives had a lot more information than Arthur did. Arthur put his plan into action. He started by breaking his routine, deviating from his predictable habits. He took different routes to work each day, varying his mode of transportation, sometimes driving, sometimes taking the bus, sometimes walking. He started visiting different restaurants for lunch, choosing crowded, anonymous establishments. He avoided eye contact with strangers, keeping his head down and his movements quick and efficient. He even started to dress differently, ditching his unremarkable accountant attire for more casual clothing, hoping to blend in with the crowds. He was testing them, probing for weaknesses, trying to identify their surveillance methods. He knew they were watching him, but he couldn't figure out how. He started to employ counter-surveillance techniques, using mirrors and reflections to spot any trailing vehicles, observing the behavior of pedestrians, and analyzing the patterns of traffic. But Reynolds was one step ahead of him. He had anticipated Arthur's moves, predicting his attempts to evade surveillance. He had deployed multiple teams, using a variety of vehicles and disguises. Reynolds knew that Arthur was smart, resourceful, and determined. But he also knew that Arthur was predictable, bound by his meticulous planning and his need for control. Reynolds had studied Arthur's file, analyzing his personality, his habits, and his weaknesses. He knew that Arthur would try to outsmart them, to turn the tables on them. But Reynolds was ready for him. He had instructed his team to be patient, to be observant, and to anticipate Arthur's moves. He had told them to let Arthur think he was getting away with it, to lull him into a false sense of security. Reynolds knew that Arthur would eventually make a mistake. Everyone does. And when he did, Reynolds would be ready to pounce. The net was tightening, slowly but surely. And Arthur was about to run out of room to maneuver. Reynolds had enough. The surveillance had provided ample evidence to justify obtaining a search warrant for Arthur's apartment. He had the gas station receipt, placing Arthur near the scene of the crime just minutes before the robbery. He had the security footage, confirming Arthur's presence at the gas station and providing a partial license plate number. He had the DMV records, linking Arthur to a dark sedan matching the description. And he had the surveillance reports, documenting Arthur's suspicious behavior, his attempts to evade surveillance, and his meetings with known criminals. He compiled all the evidence into a detailed affidavit, outlining the reasons why he believed Arthur Finch was responsible for the gems and jewels robbery. He presented the affidavit to a judge, along with a request for a search warrant. The judge reviewed the evidence carefully, considering the gravity of the crime and the potential impact on the community. He was convinced that there was probable cause to believe that Arthur Finch had committed the robbery and that evidence of the crime could be found in his apartment. He signed the search warrant. Reynolds gathered his team and briefed them on the plan. They would execute the warrant early the next morning, catching Arthur by surprise. They would search every inch of his apartment, looking for the stolen jewels, the tools used in the robbery, and any other evidence that would link him to the crime. He knew that Arthur was dangerous, resourceful, and unpredictable. But he was confident that they could handle him. They had been patient, observant, and methodical. They had followed the evidence, step by step, leading them to their suspect. Now, it was time to bring him to justice. Reynolds felt a sense of satisfaction, a feeling of closure. The game was about to end. And Arthur Finch was about to face the consequences of his actions. But first, they needed to find the jewels. And Reynolds was determined to find them. He knew they were hidden somewhere in that apartment. He could feel it. The raid on Arthur's apartment was swift and decisive. Reynolds and his team stormed the building, catching Arthur completely off guard. He was still in his pajamas, bleary-eyed and disoriented. He didn't resist arrest. The team fanned out, searching every room, every closet, every drawer. They were methodical, thorough, leaving no stone unturned. They found nothing. The apartment was meticulously clean and organized, just as Reynolds had expected. There were no signs of the robbery, no tools, no weapons, no incriminating evidence. Reynolds started to feel a twinge of doubt. Had he been wrong? Had he misread the evidence? Was Arthur Finch innocent after all? He refused to give up. He knew that the jewels were hidden somewhere in that apartment. He could feel it. He just had to find them. He focused on the details, scrutinizing every inch of the apartment. He noticed a slight discrepancy in the wall of the closet. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it caught his attention. He examined the wall more closely, running his fingers along the surface. He felt a slight indentation, a hidden seam. He pressed on the seam, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a cleverly concealed compartment. Inside the compartment, nestled in a velvet-lined box, were the stolen jewels. Diamonds, emeralds, rubies, glittering under the light. The jewels from Gems and Jewels. Reynolds felt a surge of triumph. He had been right all along. Arthur Finch was their man. He turned to Arthur, who was standing nearby, his face pale and drawn. "It's over, Finch," Reynolds said, his voice calm but firm. "The game is over." Arthur didn't say a word. He just stared at the floor, his dreams of wealth and freedom shattered. The meticulous thief had been undone by a single, forgotten gas station receipt. And now, he was about to pay the price. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Arthur stared at Reynolds, his eyes filled with disbelief. He couldn't comprehend what had happened. How had they found him? How had they connected him to the robbery? He had been so careful, so meticulous, so thorough. He thought back to the night of the robbery, replaying every detail in his mind. He had planned everything perfectly, accounting for every contingency, anticipating every move. He had left no trace, erased every footprint, covered every angle. Except for one. The gas station receipt. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The crumpled piece of paper, tucked away in his pocket, the one he had forgotten to throw away. It was so insignificant, so meaningless. How could something so small, so trivial, have brought him down? He felt betrayed. Betrayed by his own oversight, by his own carelessness. He had been so focused on the big picture, on the grand scheme of things, that he had overlooked the small details. And it was those small details that had ultimately led to his capture. He was led out of his apartment, past the flashing lights and the curious neighbors, his head hung low in shame and humiliation. He was no longer the master thief, the criminal mastermind. He was just another common criminal, caught in the act, his dreams of wealth and freedom shattered. As he was being driven to the police station, he couldn't stop thinking about the receipt. It was a constant reminder of his failure, of his arrogance, of his hubris. He had thought he was untouchable, that he was smarter than everyone else. He was wrong. He was just a man, flawed and fallible, capable of making mistakes. And that one mistake, the forgotten gas station receipt, had cost him everything. He was about to enter a world of confinement and regret, a world where he would have plenty of time to reflect on his actions and to contemplate the consequences of his carelessness. The accountant had finally been accounted for. Sitting in the interrogation room, the cold metal chair a stark contrast to the luxurious comfort he had recently afforded himself, Arthur finally had time to truly process the situation. The full weight of his failure crashed down upon him. It wasn't just the arrest, the shattered dreams, or the impending prison sentence. It was the sheer, agonizing irony of it all. He, Arthur Finch, the meticulous planner, the master of detail, the criminal mastermind, had been undone by something so utterly insignificant. He had spent weeks, months even, planning every aspect of the robbery, accounting for every conceivable contingency. He had studied security systems, memorized blueprints, and practiced escape routes. He had acquired untraceable tools, created a false alibi, and hidden the jewels in a cleverly concealed compartment. And yet, all of that effort, all of that planning, all of that meticulous preparation had been rendered meaningless by a crumpled gas station receipt. A piece of paper that most people wouldn't even give a second thought to. The irony was almost unbearable. It was a cruel joke, a cosmic prank played on him by fate. He had been so focused on the big picture, on the grand scheme of things, that he had overlooked the small details. And it was that small detail that had brought him down. He closed his eyes, picturing the receipt in his mind. The crumpled paper, the faded ink, the time stamp that had sealed his fate. It was a symbol of his failure, a testament to his hubris, a reminder that even the most careful plans can be undone by the smallest of mistakes. He had tried to be perfect, to be flawless, to be untouchable. But he was just a man, flawed and fallible, capable of making mistakes. And that one mistake had cost him everything. He shook his head, a bitter smile playing on his lips. The irony was almost too much to bear. It was a lesson he would never forget, a lesson that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The small things matter. A simple truth that he had learned far too late. Reynolds entered the interrogation room, his presence filling the small space. He sat down across from Arthur, his eyes meeting Arthur's gaze. He saw the defeat in Arthur's eyes, the resignation, the realization that it was all over. "Mr. Finch," Reynolds began, his voice calm and measured, "I have to admit, I'm impressed. You planned this robbery with remarkable skill and precision. You outsmarted the security system, evaded detection, and hid the jewels in a way that would have fooled most people. Arthur remained silent, his head bowed, his gaze fixed on the table. "You're a smart man, Mr. Finch," Reynolds continued. "A very smart man. You had a talent for this kind of thing. You could have been successful, if you had used your skills for good instead of evil." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then, he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "But even the most careful criminals make mistakes, Mr. Finch," he said, his voice low and intense. "No one is perfect. Everyone overlooks something. And in your case, that something was a gas station receipt." He saw a flicker of recognition in Arthur's eyes, a brief flash of understanding. "It was a small detail, I know," Reynolds said. "A seemingly insignificant piece of paper. But it was enough to connect you to the robbery, to unravel your carefully constructed plan. It was your undoing." He stood up, his gaze unwavering. "You're going to pay for what you did, Mr. Finch," he said. "You're going to spend a long time in prison, reflecting on your mistakes. And maybe, just maybe, you'll learn a valuable lesson. That even the most meticulous plans can be undone by the smallest of details. And that crime never pays." He turned and walked out of the interrogation room, leaving Arthur alone with his thoughts, his regrets, and his shattered dreams. The game was over. And Reynolds had won. Arthur was taken into custody, his reputation as a respected accountant forever tarnished. His colleagues, his neighbors, his friends, they would all know the truth. He was a thief, a criminal, a disgrace. His carefully constructed facade had crumbled, revealing the hidden darkness within. His future was uncertain. He faced a long prison sentence, a bleak and desolate existence. His dreams of wealth and freedom were gone, replaced by the grim reality of confinement and regret. The story of Arthur Finch served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that no one is perfect, that everyone makes mistakes. It was a lesson about the importance of attention to detail, about the consequences of arrogance and hubris, and about the enduring power of the truth. Even the most meticulous plans can be undone by the smallest oversight. A single, forgotten gas station receipt can shatter a lifetime of carefully constructed lies. The pursuit of perfection is a noble goal, but it is also an unattainable one. We are all flawed, all fallible, all capable of making mistakes. It is our imperfections that make us human. It is our ability to learn from our mistakes that allows us to grow. Arthur Finch's story was a tragedy, a story of wasted potential and squandered opportunities. But it was also a story of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always the possibility of redemption. Perhaps, one day, Arthur would be able to forgive himself for his mistakes, to learn from his failures, and to find a way to make amends for the harm he had caused. Perhaps, one day, he would be able to rebuild his life, to find a new purpose, and to reclaim his humanity. But for now, he was just a thief, a criminal, a man who had lost everything because of a crumpled gas station receipt. A reminder that even the smallest oversight can lead to a downfall. And a testament to the enduring power of justice.